welcome to Info Hub Recap, where we look back at the past week's main issues. In our headlines, the anti-corruption fight continues as Sarah teams up with the FIU to move to court with its first batch of cases. Maja is quickly developing into a modern mining town. Hinterland leaders were briefed on the benefits and opportunities. More housing being provided for Guyanese as over 350 families set to receive fully serviced house lots on the east bank of the Mararo this year. More opportunities in the oil and gas sector as local capacity building has gotten another boost. And piracy in Guyana's waters has been virtually eliminated since the coalition government took office. But the Coast Guard is not letting up in its fight to keep the scourge at bay. Stay tuned for the details of these and more. Guyana's emergency response plans for foot and mouth disease has received high marks from local and international observers. Paul McAdam tells us this follows a simulation exercise conducted in Mabaruma in the Northwest District on Saturday.
It follows a simulation exercise in Mabaruma Northwest District, Region 1, held over the weekend. Foot and mouth disease specialist and Pan American Health Organization consultant Dr. Victor Saraiva.
I was impressed not only with the EPI group readiness and observation of the procedures, but also with the coordination between those involved. When we got the roadblocks, when we went to the farm, everybody is well aware of their role in this study.
Acting Director General of the Civil Defense Commission, Lieutenant Colonel Kester Gregg, said the Guyana Livestock Development Authority proved its capacity to manage should such an emergency arise.
From the technical perspective, what I've observed, because I was able to observe the Incident Command Center, or Incident Command Post, the checkpoints, the quarantine, and the actual focus area. So that was a good experience for me as representing the Civil Defense Commission, because what we like to understand is what is happening at all sectors. I think for the authority, it's important that you know your role and responsibility and take lead in what you have to do. And that's what was demonstrated.
For Superintendent Elton Beard of the Guyana Police Force, it was a timely exercise. He said it provided an opportunity for himself and the ranks to be aware of the procedures involved in the management of a declared disaster or emergency area.
When I looked at the structure, I recognized that this is not only about the FMD, but it's in dealing with any kind of disaster and how we can mobilize our resources and all these things. And so the experience indeed was good for us.
The exercise involved 57 persons, inclusive of representatives from PAHO, WHO, IICA, the Ministry of Public Health, and other agencies. It was designed to evaluate the emergency preparedness plan, test the GLDA's ability to respond to an emergency and rapidly contain the possible spread of suspected diseases from a local farm. It also sought to establish the disease's origin and the extent of any possible spread, using methods according to the preparedness plan. Paul McAdam for InfoHub.
Minister of Public Affairs Don Hastings Williams was in Region 1 this past weekend and called on Port Kaituma residents to use the upcoming local government elections to take back their community from those who seek to stymie progress and development. Sanika Thorne traveled with the minister and has this report.
The call came after residents raised the issue of the opposition-controlled NDC sowing seeds of division in the community. At a public meeting, the residents spoke of being left out of critical decision-making process and of being denied the right to use the public spaces for events. Minister Hastings Williams reminded that it was the APNUFC administration that returned local democracy, allowing the Port Kaituma residents to administer their own affairs. She urged them to be fully informed on the process of local governance and exercise their right come year-end when the LGE will be held. The minister also took the opportunity to highlight some of the developments over the past 3 years and reaffirmed the government's commitment to working in the interests of all Guyanese, regardless of their race, religion, or political association. Sinigo Thorne for InfoHub.
The State Assets Recovery Agency Deputy Director Aubrey Heath Rettemeyer on Monday confirmed that the agency will soon be taking the first batch of cases to the courts. Stacey Carmichael reports.
Deputy Director State Assets Recovery Agency Aubrey Heath Rettemeyer, on the sidelines of an anti-corruption seminar, said information was gathered locally and abroad with assistance from external state assets recovery agencies.
We believe that within another month or so, which would be about the 90 days that Professor Thomas talked about, we will advance the first batch of cases that we have. And we do have several other batches after them. And this is because we have evidence. You have to be able to convert the information you have to evidence and then advance it to court.
Rettemeyer said it must be taken into consideration that persons charged with misappropriation and stealing of state assets usually advance defense arguments based on procedure. Hence, the need for SARA to gather evidence in a prescribed manner to ensure solid cases. Rettemeyer said a major challenge is the lack of digitized records.
Though we're getting help, we have to pay for it. And we don't have unlimited resources. So you have to judge between if this thing will bring you back, let's say, $100 million, and you have to spend $1 to $10 million, are you prepared to spend it? So those are some of the challenges we have, at least two. Well, we do have to prioritize.
The Deputy Director confirmed that they also unearthed the presence of stolen state assets abroad. In terms of statistics, SARA is working with other agencies to determine how they have done in terms of reducing financial crimes. It is also working along with the United Nations country representative to craft an anti-corruption policy based on the UN's list of recommendations. For InfoHub, Stacey Carmichael.
And more SARA news. The first in a series of anti-corruption training seminars kicked off. The need for enforcement of the law was high on the agenda. Stacey joins us again.
Addressing the first in a series of anti-corruption seminars today was Deputy Commissioner General, Customs, Excise and Trade Administration, Guyana Revenue Authority, Lancelot Wills. He called on officials to adopt an anti-corruption posture in keeping with Guyana's obligations under several international conventions. Wills said the 2005 adopted United Nations Convention Against Corruption requires a hemispheric body along with another country and specialists from the UN to evaluate member states.
It is in Guyana preparing also for such a review that we want to situate this discussion. We want to situate this edifying process as though we are not only sensitizing ourselves, but we're becoming even more aware as to what is required of us.
According to Wills, Guyana does not lack the anti-corruption laws, rather it needs to strengthen enforcement. Deputy Director State's Assets Recovery Agency, Aubrey Heath Rettemeyer, said the international community has adopted a stern posture towards corruption, therefore it is imperative that Guyana does too.
It's much easier to close the door on corruption than going after stolen wealth. We are in the process of doing that. It's costing us a lot of money and a lot of time. And if we can prevent it in the first place, it's far, far better.
The State Assets Recovery Agency is an autonomous body created through the State Assets Recovery Act of 2017 and passed in Parliament on April 13, 2017. The Act mandated SARA to recover through civil proceedings state property unlawfully acquired by a public official or any other person. For InfoHub, Stacey Carmichael.
SARA and the Financial Intelligence Unit signed an MOU later that day. Paul McAdam provides the details.
Director of the State's Asset Recovery Agency, Professor Clive Thomas, said the MOU is in keeping with the fact that the two agencies need to cooperate.
We are mandated, I think, both by international law, convention, as well as domestic law, to cooperate. Because both of us share the same set of goals, and these relate to the reduction of corruption, both as a national good and as an international obligation.
In addition, the SARA head explained that the corruption fight is one which aims to increase resource availability to improve the welfare of citizens.
The increasing tendency globally is for it to be recognized that the fight against corruption is the fight to promote welfare and the well-being of the broad masses of the population of the entire globe. It is not myself who's making this assessment, but the World Bank itself on its website has argued that public corruption is the single biggest deterrent to development.
Director of the Financial Intelligence Unit, Matthew Langevin, described the move as in keeping with international best practices such as the sharing of intelligence. The FIU is a dedicated body that was created under the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Act, which was made into law by the coalition government. Its main role is to facilitate the detection and deterrent of money laundering and terrorist financing and other financial and serious crimes. Paul McAdam for InfoHub.
Madhya becoming a township will not impinge on the autonomy of village councils. Minister Ronald Bulkan gave this assurance. Stefan Gabriel has the details.
You're becoming part of a larger area. A township of Madhya will in no way, shape, or form lead to or result in any interference with that authority that you currently possess under the Act that governs your status, your village status, the Armenian Act.
Minister Bulkan met with the leaders and residents of Mykobi, Campbelltown, Princeville, and other indigenous communities surrounding Madhya in Region 8 to discuss the establishment of the Madhya Township. The minister told indigenous leaders that becoming part of the township will increase the opportunity for villagers to play a greater role in the development of their communities.
If you become part of a different organ, in this case, the township, then what you have earned or gained is the ability to have an organ separate and apart from your village council that can make such representation on your behalf.
Minister Bulkan's team included Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, Sidney Alicock, and GCOM officials. GCOM Commissioner Charles Corbin explained the town's boundaries inclusive of indigenous villages and the voting process for the new municipality to indigenous leaders and residents. Tushaw of Mykobi, John Andre, described the brief as very informative. Madhya is expected to become a town later this year. For InfoHub, Stefan Gabriel.
On Tuesday, there was major news in the housing sector. Over 350 families will receive house lots in Providence and Peters Hall before year-end. Crystal Stahl tells us that the Central Housing and Planning Authority signed agreements with several local contractors to start preparatory works.
The coalition government has announced that it is pumping over $545 million into the preparation of 2 housing areas, which will benefit some 368 families. Contracts were today signed with several contractors for the preparatory works to commence. Agent PA's Chief Executive Officer Leland Saul said that the contractors were selected through a fair and open tender process.
Those who would have satisfied the requirement, the criteria, they were evaluated as being or deemed as being suitable to execute the work. This contract was overseen by the National Procurement and Tender Board.
Saul implored the contractors to ensure that the works are completed on schedule, as families will be anxious to begin construction of their homes.
I trust that you will adhere to the terms and conditions of the contract which you will sign. If you fail to do so, of course, as an agency, we will be forced to take whatever appropriate action.
Director of Projects Omar Narain said work which begins in June is expected to be completed within the next 5 months. Chung's Global Enterprise, Guy America Construction, Colin Talbot Contracting Services, and H. Knott & Sons are some of the contractors enlisted. Quality affordable housing has been a major priority for the government since coming to office in 2015. Crystal Stahl for InfoHub.
Guyana is moving to access an advance of a U.S. $20 million World Bank loan to build capacity as part of preparations for when that first barrel of oil comes out of the ground in early 2020. Our oil and gas specialist, Tiffany Rojas, reports.
Minister of Natural Resources, Raphael Trotman, says the government is pushing to receive the initial advance of U.S. $1.7 million by June.
It requires us establishing urgently, strong word, but it is urgent, a project implementation unit. Must have procurement capacities, we must have a coordinator and a financial director. So once those are in place, we can receive the advance, and the larger tranche will be forthcoming towards the end of the year.
The loan will be used to build capacity in the oil and gas industry in 3 important areas, Minister Trotman explains.
Strengthening the regulatory framework, working with the government on the issue of bringing the gas to shore, and the other one is just general capacity building.
Today, Minister Trotman met with World Bank Country Director for Caribbean countries in Latin America, Tashin Saeed, and other technical experts to discuss the loan, which was secured by the Minister of Finance, Winston Jordan. Reporting for InfoHub, Tiffany Rojas.
Paul McAdam now reports that government has taken a strategic and coordinated approach to combat piracy, which is now at an all-time low to Guyana, but there is no letting up in the fight to neutralize the pirates.
The Guyana Defence Forces Coast Guard unit will be given resources once available to increase its presence and protect local fishing grounds. So said Minister of State Joseph Harmon at last Friday's post-cabinet press conference. He reminded that when the coalition government took office, rates of piracy were much higher.
There were 10 reports of piracy. In 2012, there were 22. In 2013, 3. 2014, 8. 2015, 4. In 2016, there was 1. 2017, 9. And for 2018, up to this incident, there was none. This basically was not something that occurred by magic, but it was the result of a consistent approach which the government took to dealing with these matters that when they occur, these piracy matters.
He pointed to the reactivation of the Anti-Piracy Task Force and the engagement by the Public Security Minister and his officials with fisherfolk to discuss ways and means to protect their lives and vessels whilst at sea.
You'll recall we'd also even examined the use of transponders to be attached to the fishing vessels so that they can actually give you a signal if they were in distress. So all of these things were happening, and in addition to which, we were flying fortnightly aerial sorties around the coast by our GDF aircraft.
It was this combined effort, the Minister of State added, that forced those with criminal intent outside of Guyana's waters, and it is an issue that the security forces will pay greater attention to. Public Security Minister Kemrat Ramjatan led a high-level delegation to Guyana's eastern neighbour to liaise with Surinamese counterparts as investigations into the attacks which left 15 dead in that country's waters continue. Cabinet was also briefed on the measures being taken by Guyana and Suriname to help bring those perpetrators to justice, and the need for closer collaboration between those countries' security forces was also cited. Paul McAdam for InfoHub.
The Commission of Inquiry into the 2008 Lindo Creek Massacre ended Tuesday afternoon. The final witness, Leonard Arokia, maintained that it was impossible for the Fineman gang to have killed the miners. Paul joins us again.
Arokium did not budge from his belief that it was the joint services and not the Rondell Fineman Rollins gang that carried out the killings on or around June 21, 2008. Appearing before the Commission of Inquiry on Tuesday, Arokium said he's still paying for the lease of the camp. However, he noted that since the incident, he has never returned. According to Arokium, the issue is not about Fineman, but about who is trying to cover up the murder of the 8 miners.
According to information, Fineman was tackled at Christmas Falls. Christmas Falls is 14 miles from the junction. It's only one road. Christmas Falls is 14 miles from the junction coming back north. That's the junction that you go into my camp. The joint service were occupying the gate, which is 5.5 miles to where the gate is. So I don't see how they would have tackled Fineman at Christmas Falls. You have to pass back right there, and the joint service there.
Arokium said it would be a foolish move by Rollins to do as the joint services have claimed.
He's a really brave man, or he must be smarter than the joint service because he got no sense. He could have killed people, burn them, and the joint service there. Somebody has to tell me something.
The Guyana Defense Force was unable to defend itself yesterday and even found itself in some hot water after it was discovered that a statement said to have been given by a self-confessed teen member of the Fine Man gang, Dwayne Williams, was never made in the first place. Deputy Superintendent of the Guyana Police Force, Gary McAllister, presenting records from the Ituni Police Station, revealed that on June 16, 2008, Williams made no such statement about the miners being killed by Fine Man. This was told to the Commission on the oath on Monday by retired GDF Colonel Fitzroy Ward. The Commission of Inquiry into the Lindo Creek Massacre is seeking to determine who is responsible for the deaths of the 8 miners, Dax and Cedric Arokium, Bonnie Harry, Nigel Torres, Compton Spears, Horace Drakes, Lancelot Lee, and Clifton Wong. Paul McAdam for InfoHub.
On Wednesday, Attorney General Basil Williams lashed out against some unfounded PPP allegations. Stacey Carmichael reports that AG Williams inherited from the PPP crippling judgment debts and ill-prepared cases involving millions of dollars. Here are the details from Stacey.
Briefing the media today, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Basil Williams said the Chambers is rebuilding after being broken and divided following the reign of former AG Anil Nandlal. Reference was made to the inherited judgment debt cases from the PPPC government, including the $7.2 billion Rudisa Beverages case and the $1.7 million Tulsi Prasad case, among others.
In the Rudisha case, the PPPC government had imposed an environmental tax on non-returnable beverage containers in breach of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. The CCJ noted that the government of Guyana, represented by Nandlal, did not lead evidence to show that the tax was transferred, as he claimed.
The AG said Nandlal also outsourced cases to private lawyers without leaving any trace. Those lawyers failed to inform or hand over those cases, Minister Williams noted, as in the Dipcon Engineering and Tulsi Prasad cases.
Nandlal left, however, a broken and divided office, characterized by 2 warring camps, the latter because he had taken from the DPP's chambers a counsel whom he elevated to the rank of Deputy Solicitor General, paying her a salary over $1 million a month with allowances in the AG's chambers. The counsel is Ms. Pritima Kasoon. The Solicitor General was Ms. Sita Ramlal.
The AG Chambers adopted an anti-corruption stance, and Minister Williams committed that it will operate in an accountable and transparent manner. For InfoHub, Stacey Carmichael.
One of the signal achievements of the coalition government has been the establishment of the Public Procurement Commission, which had been stymied for many years under the previous administration. Sanika Thorne looked back at the chronology of events.
Prior to the establishment of the Public Procurement Commission, Cabinet held full powers in the procurement process, an approach that did not allow for decentralization in the awarding of contracts. The previous administration's position that Cabinet should play a role in the award of contracts contributed to the years-long delay of the Commission's establishment. When the coalition government took office in 2015, one of its main objectives was to restore public confidence in government through, among other initiatives, a transparent process for the award of contracts. In October 2016, the 5 members of the PPC Commission were sworn in by President David Granger. The commission is chaired by Carol Corbin. The head of state urged the commission's member to uphold the tenets of the Constitution and to be independent, impartial, and fair in the execution of their duties.
The Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana is sacrosanct. Its provisions must be observed and applied scrupulously. Its authority must never be diminished or ignored. The establishment of the Public Procurement Commission represents respect for the supreme law of the land.
The PPC is an oversight body which monitors the procurement of goods, works, and services to ensure the process is fair, equitable, transparent, and competitive, and that it functions as set out in the Constitution. Its establishment is a demonstration of the government's commitment to the principles of accountability and transparency. Sanika Thorne, InfoHub.
Thursday was World Telecommunication and Information Society Day, and Minister of Public Telecommunications Catherine Hughes says Guyana has progressed to the point where citizens are using some form of technology daily. Stacey joins us again.
Minister of Public Telecommunications Catherine Hughes, in her World Telecommunication and Information Society Day address, WTISD reflected on the progress made in the ICT sector. Starting in 2016, the Ministry of Public Telecommunications made a promise to not only improve connectivity but to provide internet access countrywide. Providing online learning opportunities and expanding the e-government network were primary objectives.
The education sector is where we have placed the most emphasis. You would recall that one of our first acts as a ministry was to distribute laptop computers to every qualified teacher in all 10 regions. Of course, this is being followed up now with computer literacy training for the teachers who are not yet computer literate, especially in our hinterland regions.
Today, the minister said some 120 locations are connected countrywide, including government agencies, onto a secure e-government network. The focus now, with support from the private sector, is connecting the primary schools.
We're going to give our children every single tool they need to learn and excel at the 4 big sisters. They are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, better known as STEM. STEM is the basis of the high-tech world we live in, the world we work in, do business in, import products from, and teach our children to compete in. STEM is what drives technology, robots, and artificial intelligence.
Minister Hughes also acknowledged the commitment by the 117 management committees of the community ICT hubs. This year's WTISD is being celebrated under the International Telecommunications Union developed theme, enabling the positive use of artificial intelligence for all. For InfoHub, Stacey Carmichael.
On Friday, Natural Resources Minister Raphael Trotman told the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Natural Resources that decisions relating to the oil and gas industry were informed by happenings in Venezuela. Tiffany Rogers has the details.
Minister Trotman says the demarcation of the Stabroek Block from the Barima Winey to the Corentyne was a strategic decision.
We needed a partner in 1999 to cover the entire sea space from tip to tip, and that company happened to be an American company.
The threat to the country's territorial integrity by Venezuela was the primary reason the government moved to anchor ExxonMobil in its waters, Minister Trotman noted.
We wanted to be working with a company that had international gravitas and strength and the wherewithal, financially and politically, to represent us in the international arena.
Venezuela claimed Guyana's sea space following the announcement of the first oil discovery back in 2015. The western neighbour later backed down following diplomatic pressure. Minister Trotman described the update of the Exxon agreement as a strategic move against Venezuela's continued claims on Guyana's territorial space. Guyana's defence of its territorial integrity against Venezuela is now before the International Court of Justice. Guyana is set to begin oil production by 2020. Minister Trotman says this too is also a strategic push to protect Guyana's oil resource.
We needed to assert our sovereignty over our resources, given the 2015 decree by Venezuela and the utterings that were coming from Venezuela. Hence the reason why we are going to production in what is considered relatively record times.
The Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Natural Resources was also briefed on developments in the forestry sector and the ministry's measures to treat GGMC workers exposed to mercury. Reporting for InfoHub, Tiffany Rogers.
We also learned that after millions of dollars in corrective works, the Cato Secondary School will finally open in September. This was confirmed after a high-level team recently toured the school complex. The team comprised of Minister of Education, Nicolette Henry, and Minister of Social Cohesion, Dr. George Norton. The Cato Secondary School was completed 3 years ago, but was never commissioned since investigations revealed a number of structural defects, which needed to be remedied before students and teachers could occupy the building. Both ministers expressed satisfaction, indicating that it is the government's mandate to ensure that every child has access to an education. Whilst there are minor works to be completed, Minister Henry said that the school should be second to none. The Cato Secondary is this country's first billion-dollar school and will cater for more than 900 students, inclusive of dormitory facilities.